Maria Alvarez had grown up in a small village where every sunrise brought more dust than hope. The land around her home had once been full of life, green fields, running water, and families who sang while they worked. But years of hard weather had turned everything dry. The river shrank into a thin, muddy line. The crops failed again and again. Some families left to look for better places. Others stayed only because they had nowhere else to go. Maria's family was one of those who stayed. Her father tried to work the fields from dawn until sunset, but the earth refused to give anything back. Her mother had grown tired from so many years of struggle. Maria did everything she could to help, collecting firewood, taking care of the younger children, even walking long distances to find clean water. She was only 19, but she felt much older. Even in difficult times, Maria tried to keep a soft heart. She took comfort in small things: the cool shade under the old mesquite tree, the sound of her little sister's laughter, the scent of warm bread when her mother managed to bake something special. But comfort could not fill empty stomachs. Each month, life became harder. The village talked quietly about hunger, work shortages, and the fear of another dry season. One afternoon, when Maria was returning from the well, she noticed a stranger riding toward the village. Travelers were rare, so everyone watched as the tall man on horseback approached. His clothes were dusty from many miles on the road, and his hat cast a shadow over his face. Yet his posture showed confidence, as if he was used to long journeys and uncertain lands. His name, the villagers learned, was James Carter, a cowboy from the north who moved from place to place in search of work. He spoke with a calm voice and had a polite way of greeting people. Some villagers approached him with curiosity, while others kept their distance. Outsiders brought stories, but they also brought questions. Maria noticed him only briefly at first. She was used to seeing strangers pass through, rest for a night, and disappear by morning. She expected James would be the same. But he stayed for several days, helping at the village well and offering to repair broken fences. He worked with quiet determination, not asking for anything in return except a chance to rest before moving on. Maria's father took interest in him, impressed by his willingness to help. Her mother, too, expressed that he seemed kind. Maria listened, but did not say much. She had learned that people were not always what they appeared to be. Still, she noticed the way James looked at the world. With caution, yes, but also with a sense of responsibility. The turning point came one evening when Maria overheard her parents speaking in hushed voices. They were worried about the coming season. Without rain, the family would not have enough food. Her younger siblings needed better clothing, and her father's tools were worn down from years of overuse. Maria knew the truth. They were running out of options. The next morning, her father quietly told her that James had asked permission to speak with her. Maria felt her heart skip. She barely knew the man. She did not expect anything personal from him. When they met under the quiet shade of the mesquite tree, James spoke carefully. He explained that he was lonely on the road, moving from town to town with no family of his own. He admired how hard Maria worked and how she cared for her family. He believed they could build a life together. His words were gentle, but his expression held something heavier. Maria could not tell if it was sorrow, worry, or something else entirely. She was surprised, almost speechless. Marriage had never been a dream she spoke of. What future could she imagine when her present was so full of burdens? But James continued, saying he owned a small piece of land farther north, a place where the soil was kinder and work more stable. He said she would never go hungry with him. Her family would no longer suffer. Maria listened to every word, trying to understand whether this was an opportunity or another kind of hardship. She did not feel love, not the warm, certain kind people wrote songs about, but she felt the heavy weight of her family's struggles pressing down on her shoulders. James was offering security, and security was something her life had been missing for far too long. That afternoon, her parents asked what she thought. Her mother's eyes held a worry she couldn't hide. Her father hesitated before speaking, trying not to force her, yet unable to hide the truth. This choice could save their family. Maria spent the night thinking. She looked at her younger siblings sleeping beside her, their faces peaceful despite the difficulties around them. She wondered what kind of future they would have. She thought of her parents, who were growing more tired each year. She thought of the cracked, dry earth outside and how long it might take for the land to heal, if it ever did. By dawn, she made her decision. When she told James she would marry him, he looked both relieved and surprised. He promised to protect her, provide for her, and take her somewhere safer. He spoke with sincerity, though a shadow of something unspoken passed across his face. It was quick, but Maria noticed. She wondered what stories he was not telling her. Still, she did not pull away. She accepted his offer, believing it was her chance, maybe her only chance, to escape the cycle of poverty that had shaped her entire life. She tried to imagine a different future, a home where the fields grew tall again, where children could laugh without worry, where she did not have to watch her parents fight against hunger. The village prepared a small ceremony. It was simple but heartfelt. A few neighbors brought handmade gifts, a blanket, a clay bowl, a small woven basket. Her mother brushed her hair with gentle hands. Her father shook James's hand with quiet hope. Maria tried to smile, though her heart was trembling with uncertainty. When she left the village, she looked back one last time. She saw her family standing by the road, waving with mixed expressions: pride, hope, sadness. She carried their dreams with her as she climbed onto James's horse. The journey north began. The land changed slowly around them. Days were long, filled with travel, conversation, and moments of silence. James talked about the places he had seen, but some subjects he avoided. Maria noticed his eyes always scanning the distance, as if expecting something, or someone, from far away. Though she still did not fully understand him, she felt a strange comfort knowing she had chosen action instead of fear. She told herself that bravery sometimes meant walking into the unknown. She held on to that thought as the sun set behind them and the road stretched endlessly ahead. She did not know what waited for her in her new life. She did not know what truths James carried, but she believed she had done what she must for herself and for the people she loved. And as the sky darkened and the stars appeared one by one, Maria felt a quiet promise rise within her. She would face whatever came next with strength, because she had always been stronger than her circumstances, stronger than the drought, stronger than the hunger, stronger than the fear of stepping into a future she could not yet see. The journey north took many days, and each day taught Maria something new about the world, about James, and about herself. At first, she felt nervous riding beside a man she barely knew, but as the sun rose and set over long stretches of open land, she slowly relaxed. There was something calming about the wide horizons and the quiet sound of hoofbeats. She felt like she had stepped out of her old life and into a new chapter, one filled with both hope and unanswered questions. James tried to make the days comfortable for her. Whenever they stopped to rest, he made sure she had water and shade. He always chose safe places to camp, usually near a small patch of trees or a peaceful stream. He spoke politely and never hurried her, especially in the mornings when she felt tired from long hours on horseback. He showed small but thoughtful habits, like brushing leaves away before she sat down or giving her the softer blanket at night. But even with his kindness, there were things about him she could not understand. Sometimes, when the wind rustled through the trees or an animal moved in the distance, James's expression tightened. He would stop talking, look carefully around, and listen for a long moment. Maria wondered why he acted like someone expecting news from far away. He wasn't afraid, but he was alert, always aware, always watching. She asked him once if he expected trouble. His answer came with a soft smile, but there was something hidden beneath it. "It's just a habit from the road," he said. "When you travel alone for years, you learn to pay attention to every sound." Maria accepted the explanation, but her heart told her there was more to it. Still, she didn't push him. A person's past, she believed, was their own to share when the time was right. After more than a week of travel, they reached a small trading post near the edge of a wider settlement. A few cabins stood scattered around the area, and beyond them stretched open fields with grazing animals. People moved about quietly, some carrying baskets, others working with tools or tending to horses. The trading post was a meeting place for many communities: settlers, travelers, and families from nearby lands. It was also a place where people of different cultures lived side by side. Maria found the mix of languages and clothing styles interesting. Everything felt new and different, yet welcoming. James seemed familiar with the area. The shopkeeper greeted him with recognition, and a few people nodded at him politely. Maria was relieved. She had wondered whether James had truly spoken honestly about knowing the land. His familiarity made her feel safer. They spent the night in a small room beside the trading post. As Maria lay down to rest, she couldn't stop thinking about how different life here felt. There were more resources, more people, and more opportunities. It was nothing like the quiet, struggling village she had left behind. She hoped she could adjust to all of this. The next morning, James guided her to a small cabin about an hour's ride from the trading post. It was humble but sturdy, with a neat porch and a little fenced area behind it. A soft carpet of dry grass surrounded the cabin, and a few trees stood nearby, offering shade. "This will be our home," James said gently. Maria looked around with careful eyes. She noticed the cabin had been kept clean and organized. Inside there was a modest kitchen, a simple table, 2 chairs, and shelves holding a few supplies. In the corner stood a bed covered with a woven blanket. A window let warm light spill into the room. It felt warm, safe, and full of possibility. But even in this peaceful place, Maria sensed something she couldn't name. Sometimes, when James returned from the trading post or checked the animals outside, his expression would carry a quiet tension. He didn't show anger or fear, just an awareness, a constant readiness. One afternoon, as they were unpacking supplies, a friendly neighbor named Clara stopped by with a basket of bread. She welcomed them warmly and stayed for tea. Clara was talkative, cheerful, and happy to meet someone new. During their conversation, Clara mentioned that the area was known for its shared land and peaceful exchanges between the nearby communities. Maria listened with interest but noticed how James shifted in his chair. He didn't look uncomfortable, just thoughtful, like someone remembering something important. After Clara left, Maria looked at James curiously. "Do you know many people here?" she asked. James hesitated. "I've passed through before," he said, "but I didn't stay long." It was a simple answer, yet Maria felt it wasn't the whole truth. She wondered what memories he carried, but she respected his silence. Everyone, she believed, deserved time to share their story at their own pace. Days turned into weeks as they settled into their new life. Maria learned how to take care of the small garden next to the cabin. She planted herbs and small vegetables, hoping to grow enough for daily meals. She enjoyed the work. It reminded her of home, but without the heaviness of worry that had filled her village. James worked too, helping neighbors, repairing fences, and guiding new travelers who arrived at the trading post. People appreciated him. He was patient, helpful, and modest. But even with all the kindness he offered, he kept a distance that only Maria could see. Sometimes he would stand outside in the evening, looking toward the distant hills with a thoughtful expression. Maria would watch him quietly from the window. She wanted to ask what troubled him, but something in his posture told her he wasn't ready to speak. Slowly, whispers began to reach Maria's ears. When she visited the trading post or spoke with Clara, she heard small pieces of information, never from one person directly, but from tiny comments stitched together. There was a misunderstanding with travelers some months ago. Someone got into trouble while guiding a group through the woods. A cowboy passed through quickly, looking restless. None of the stories were clear. None pointed to anything unkind or unsafe. But there was a common thread. Someone who resembled James had been involved in a situation that caused confusion and sadness for others. The details were always soft and vague, like stories carried by the wind. Maria began to wonder if these whispers were connected to the tension she saw in James's eyes. One evening, while she prepared dinner, James walked into the cabin looking more thoughtful than usual. His shirt was dusty and his hat hung loosely in his hand. She sensed he had something on his mind. "You're quiet today," she said gently. He nodded. "Just a long day." She smiled softly. "You can talk to me, you know." James opened his mouth as if to speak, then paused. His silence told her more than words could. There was something he wanted to share, but something held him back. She didn't push him. She believed that understanding came slowly, like the steady growth of roots beneath the soil. That night, after they finished eating, they sat outside on the porch. The sky was filled with stars, bright and clear. The world around them felt peaceful, yet Maria noticed how James's gaze drifted toward the quiet paths leading to farther lands. As she watched him, she remembered the stories she had heard. Though none of them included harmful details, they painted a picture of a man who carried burdens from the past, burdens he hadn't yet put into words. Maria wondered what those stories meant and whether they would ever touch her life. She wondered what kind of truth rested behind James's constant watchfulness. She knew they could build a good life together. She knew he was kind, patient, and respectful. But she also knew that a person's past could shape their future in unexpected ways. Even in this calm place, she felt the quiet pull of something unseen, something waiting just beyond the edge of their days. She didn't know it yet, but soon she would discover that her new life held mysteries deeper than she imagined, and that the gentle peace on the surface carried stories written long before she arrived. The world around them was calm for now, but change was already moving, preparing to touch their lives one quiet night. Maria had been living in the little cabin for several months now. She had learned the patterns of the land, the sounds of the wind, and the gentle rhythms of life in this new place. Each morning, she worked in her small garden, and each afternoon, she helped neighbors or walked to the trading post to buy supplies. She felt grateful for the fresh air, the wide sky, and the sense of stability she had never known before. But even with this peace around her, she sensed something quietly shifting in the background. James had grown more thoughtful in the last few weeks. He was kind as always, gentle in his words and patient with her needs, but his eyes carried a deeper worry. He often looked toward the distant hills as though expecting something he could not name. Some evenings, he stepped outside long after sunset and stood silently beneath the stars. Maria sometimes watched him from the window, wondering what thoughts traveled through his mind. One evening, as the days stretched closer to the warm season, the sky glowed a soft gold. Maria was preparing a simple dinner, bread, beans, and warm tea, when she noticed James staring out the window with a faraway look. She approached him quietly. "Is something bothering you?" she asked gently. He gave a small smile. "Nothing you need to worry about." But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Maria knew there were things James kept inside. She knew he had stories he hadn't yet shared. She also knew that people needed time to reveal the pieces of their lives that carried the deepest emotions. She didn't push him. She simply placed a comforting hand on his arm before returning to her work. That night, a soft wind blew through the valley. The moon rose full and bright, lighting the trees around the cabin with a pale glow. Maria and James finished their meal and stepped outside to sit on the porch. The world looked quiet, almost magical. Fireflies floated near the trees, glowing softly. The nearby creek whispered gently as it moved over smooth stones. As they sat together, Maria felt a strange sense of calm mixed with something she couldn't explain. It was as if the night was holding a secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. They talked for a while about small things, the garden, the weather, and the neighbors who had stopped by earlier. But beneath their words, Maria sensed that James was waiting for something he couldn't speak aloud. Eventually, they went inside to rest. Maria fell asleep quickly, tired from the long day. But sometime in the middle of the night, she woke suddenly, her heart beating faster than usual. She wasn't frightened, just alert, as though something had gently pulled her from sleep. The cabin was quiet. The moonlight spilled through the small window, casting silver shapes across the floor. Maria listened carefully. At first, she heard nothing except the faint wind outside. Then she heard it. A soft voice. A woman's voice. It wasn't speaking loudly or calling out. It was singing. The sound was gentle, almost like a lullaby carried by the wind. The melody was unfamiliar, slow, and filled with emotion. It didn't sound like any song Maria knew. The tune was beautiful, but also heavy, as if telling a story of sorrow and strength. Maria sat up quietly, careful not to wake James. She felt drawn to the sound, as though it held meaning she didn't yet understand. She slipped from the bed, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and moved toward the window. The song grew clearer. It came from outside. Maria hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should wake James, but something in the song felt peaceful rather than frightening. With slow steps, she opened the cabin door. The night air was cool. The moonlight lit the ground with a soft glow. At first, she didn't see anything unusual. The trees stood still, and the path toward the hills looked empty. Then she saw her. A woman stood several yards away, quietly singing beneath the moonlight. She wore traditional clothing with soft patterns that reflected her culture. Her hair was long and dark, braided neatly. Her expression was calm, full of dignity. She didn't look angry or threatening. She looked like someone who had traveled far to deliver a message of the heart. Maria froze in place, watching her. The woman wasn't looking at her. She was looking at the cabin. More precisely, she was looking directly toward the window where James slept. Maria's breath caught. She didn't understand what she was witnessing, yet she felt certain the moment held deep meaning. The woman's song continued, carrying notes of longing, memories, and something unspoken. After a moment, the woman stopped singing. She stood very still, her face calm but serious. She seemed to be waiting. Not for Maria, but for someone else. Maria quietly whispered, "James." She turned to see if he had heard anything. To her surprise, he was already awake. Standing behind her in the doorway. His face looked pale under the moonlight. His eyes were wide, full of something Maria had never seen before, recognition. He stepped forward slowly, as though his body carried both fear and respect. Maria felt his hand reach for hers. It wasn't a gesture of fear. It was a gesture of needing strength. "She's here," he whispered softly. "Do you know her?" Maria asked in a quiet voice. James nodded without taking his eyes off the woman. Maria realized then that this moment had been waiting to happen for a long time. The woman outside didn't move. She continued to watch James with gentle strength, as though seeing him after many months of searching. Her presence was calm, not filled with anger, only filled with purpose. "Should we speak to her?" Maria asked. James hesitated for a long moment. Finally, he swallowed and stepped forward. Yes, he said softly. It's time. They walked together, slow and steady, until they stood a few steps away from the woman. Maria remained slightly behind James, sensing that this was a meeting meant for him. The woman looked at James with a depth of emotion that words could not express. Her eyes held questions, memories, and something like forgiveness, or perhaps something still undecided. James gently bowed his head in a respectful gesture. The woman spoke softly in her own language, her voice calm and measured. Maria didn't understand the words, but the tone told her enough. The woman wasn't here to harm or accuse. She was here because she carried a story that needed to be spoken. James listened with deep focus. His eyes softened, and his shoulders relaxed. When the woman finished speaking, James responded quietly in English, his voice steady but emotional. "I remember," he said. "I have not forgotten." The woman nodded, accepting his words. She lifted her hand slightly in a peaceful gesture. Then she stepped back, her face still calm. She looked at Maria with a gentle expression, acknowledging her presence with respect. Maria felt warmth in that gesture, as though the woman wished her no fear or worry. Then, without hurry, the woman turned and walked toward the distant trees. The moonlight followed her steps until she disappeared into the shadows. Silence filled the night. Maria looked at James, her heart full of questions she didn't know how to ask. James let out a long breath, one that sounded like he had been holding it for months. He placed a hand over his chest, as if steadying his heartbeat. "It's time I tell you everything," he whispered. Maria didn't speak. She simply nodded, understanding that the peaceful visitor had brought more than a song. She had brought a truth that would change everything. The night around them felt still, waiting for the next chapter to begin. James stood quietly in the cool night air, his face touched by moonlight. Maria watched him carefully, sensing that he was holding memories that had stayed locked inside him for far too long. After the mysterious Apache woman left, the silence around them felt deeper, almost sacred. It was the kind of silence that encouraged truth to come forward. He turned to Maria, his eyes heavy with feelings he had never shared. "Let's sit," he said softly. They walked back to the porch and sat side by side. The wooden boards beneath them felt cool, and a soft wind brushed against their faces. Maria wrapped her shawl tighter around herself as she prepared to listen, not sure what she would hear, but ready to understand. James took a long breath, the kind people take before speaking a truth that has been carried for too long. "There is something you should know," he began, his voice calm but emotional. "Something from my past that I never had the courage to talk about." Maria nodded gently. "I'm here," she whispered. "You can tell me." He looked out toward the distant trees where the woman had disappeared. His gaze softened, filled with memory. "Before I came to your village," he said, "I traveled with a group of people who worked as guides. We helped families and travelers move from one place to another. I thought it was a simple job, but I didn't understand the responsibility that came with it." His voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with longing to finally explain something that had been misunderstood for too long. "One day," he continued, "our group met a family from the Apache community. They were kind, gentle people. They needed help crossing to another part of the land because the travel was difficult. I was young and unsure of myself, but I wanted to help." Maria listened closely. She could feel the sincerity in every word. He wasn't speaking of conflict. He was speaking of misunderstanding, something that could happen between any two groups of people who didn't share the same language or customs. "The family included the woman you saw tonight," he said quietly. "Her name is Nalin. She traveled with her husband, who was a respected member of her community. They were patient with us even when we made mistakes. They shared food, shared stories, and even showed me how to read signs on the land. Maria felt her heart soften. She could imagine the scenes. Travelers walking together, sharing small moments of trust, learning from each other. She could sense that James had felt deeply connected to them. One day, James went on, the path we chose turned difficult. A storm was coming, and the air grew tense. People were tired. Some were scared. Communication became harder. Even small misunderstandings felt heavier than usual. He paused, searching for the right words. I made a mistake, he whispered. Not a harmful one, but a misunderstanding that caused confusion. I thought Nalin and her husband were heading in one direction, but they were waiting for the rest of the group. Because of my unclear instructions, the group took longer to reunite. They didn't hold it against me, but I held it against myself. I felt responsible for their worry. Maria breathed out softly. She could sense his guilt, though the situation was not dangerous or cruel. It was simply a human moment, miscommunication, confusion, and the weight of responsibility. After that day, he continued, I felt ashamed. I thought I had disappointed people who trusted me. I thought I wasn't meant for guiding others. So I left. I didn't say goodbye. I should have. But I let my fear speak louder than my courage. He closed his eyes, his expression heavy with regret. I didn't leave because of them, he said. I left because I didn't know how to face my own feelings. I cared about them deeply. They were some of the kindest people I had ever met, but I convinced myself that they were better off without me. Maria felt sadness rise in her chest. Not sadness for danger, there had been no harm, but sadness for the emotional distance James carried. He had walked away from people who cared, simply because he didn't believe he deserved their kindness. Months passed, James said softly, but I never stopped thinking about them. When I traveled through new towns, I listened for news. Sometimes people mentioned an Apache woman searching for someone. I didn't know it was Nalin at first. When I realized it was her, I didn't know what to do. I wondered why she would look for me after my foolish mistakes. He gave a faint, sad smile. But she kept searching, not because she was angry, but because she wanted to speak with me. She wanted to understand why I left so suddenly. That's why she came tonight. Maria felt warmth spreading through her heart. The story was not one of harm or conflict. It was a story of human emotion, conscience, misunderstanding, and unfinished conversations. She wanted you to acknowledge your feelings, Maria said softly. She wanted closure. James looked at her with gratitude. Yes, he whispered. She didn't come with anger. She came with peace. She wanted me to know that my mistakes didn't break her trust. She wanted me to stop carrying guilt for something that did not define me. Maria felt her own eyes grow warm. She reached out and placed her hand over his. You should forgive yourself, she said gently. For the first time since she had known him, James looked lighter. His shoulders relaxed. His voice softened. When she spoke tonight, he said, she told me she remembered the kindness I showed. She told me that I helped her family in ways I never realized. She said they often thought of me with respect, not disappointment. Maria smiled softly. That's beautiful. James nodded, emotion filling his eyes. She came, he continued, to remind me that leaving without saying goodbye left a hole that needed to be closed. And now it has been. Maria felt deeply moved. She admired Nalin even though she had only seen her for a few minutes. The woman carried grace in her presence, strength in her silence, and peace in her actions. She gave you a gift tonight, Maria said, the gift of understanding. James looked at her with gratitude. Yes, he whispered. She did. They sat quietly for a long moment. listening to the gentle wind moving through the trees. The night no longer felt heavy. It felt healed. Maria rested her head on James's shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me with your story." He took her hand softly. "Thank you," he answered, "for listening without judging." The cabin behind them stood warm and safe, its windows glowing softly in the moonlight. The world around them felt still, embracing the quiet truth that had finally been shared. Maria felt closer to James than ever before, not because she learned something dramatic, but because she had learned something deeply human: his guilt, his sorrow, his growth, and his hope. The night felt full of gentle magic, as though the stars themselves approved of the peace that had settled into James's heart. "I feel lighter," he whispered. "And now," Maria said with a smile, "you can begin again." James nodded. "Yes, with you." They rose slowly and walked back into the cabin, leaving the porch quiet under the moonlit sky. The air felt fresher, the night calmer. The moment Nalin had created stayed with them like a quiet blessing. As Maria lay down to sleep, she knew that a new chapter was beginning, one where the past no longer weighed James down, and where their future would grow from honesty and trust. She closed her eyes with peace in her heart. And outside, the night continued to glow softly, carrying the promise of tomorrow. The next morning arrived gently, with soft sunlight touching the tops of the trees and warming the cabin walls. Birds sang in the branches outside, their voices clear and bright, as if they were celebrating a new beginning. Maria opened her eyes slowly, feeling rested in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. For a moment, she lay still, remembering the events of the night before: the moonlit meeting, the soft song in the distance, the calm and respectful presence of the woman named Nalin, and James finally sharing his truth. It felt like a dream, yet it was real. She turned and saw James sitting at the edge of the bed, tying his boots. His posture was relaxed, and there was a gentle ease in his movements that she hadn't seen before. It was as if a quiet weight had lifted from his shoulders overnight. "Good morning," he said with a soft smile. "Good morning," Maria answered, returning the smile. He looked younger somehow, lighter, as though the worry he had carried for years had finally been replaced by peace. Maria felt happiness for him rising in her chest. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "for the first time in a long time." She nodded. She understood. Sometimes peace arrived not from forgetting the past, but from understanding it and letting it rest. As they prepared breakfast together, warm cornbread, honey, and tea, the cabin felt brighter. The sunlight danced on the walls, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Their movements flowed easily, gently, without the usual quiet tension that had often lingered in the space. After they finished eating, James stepped outside to check on the animals. Maria followed him out with her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. The morning air felt new and hopeful. The small garden beside the cabin looked fresh with dew, and the sky stretched endlessly above them. Everything in the world seemed to have taken a deep breath, ready to start again. James leaned against the fence post, looking toward the distant hills. "Do you think she'll come back?" Maria asked softly. James shook his head gently. "No, she doesn't need to. The reason she came has been completed." Maria understood. Nalin had not arrived seeking apology or blame. She had come to close a chapter that had remained open for too long. Her presence had brought understanding, not tension, and now that the truth had been spoken, her path had shifted back to her own life. "She gave us something special," Maria said. "Yes," James agreed. "She did." He looked at the peaceful land around him and breathed in deeply, as though every part of the moment was something to appreciate. For the next several days, Life continued with a calm rhythm. Maria focused on tending her garden, planting new seeds she had bought from the trading post. She knelt on the soft earth, smoothing the soil with her fingers, feeling hopeful about the future harvest. James helped a neighbor repair a broken fence, and when he returned home each evening, there was no shadow behind his smile. He worked with purpose, not distraction. The worry that had once made him glance over his shoulder had faded. People around the settlement noticed the change. Clara, the friendly neighbor, commented on it one afternoon when she came by with fresh fruit. "Your husband seems more relaxed these days," she said with a cheerful grin. Maria simply nodded with a warm smile. "He is." Clara tilted her head playfully. "It must be your good company." Maria laughed softly, but didn't explain further. Some moments were too personal, too special to share openly. Another week passed, filled with peaceful days. The land around them grew greener as the warm season approached. The creek beside the cabin sparkled as sunlight touched the flowing water. Even the nights felt softer, as though the moon carried a different kind of glow. One evening, James returned from the trading post with a small cloth bag in his hand. Maria looked at him curiously as he placed it on the table. "What is that?" she asked. "Something I've been meaning to give you," he said, his voice gentle. He opened the bag and took out a beautifully carved wooden pendant. It was shaped like a small leaf, smooth and delicate, with tiny lines that made it look almost real. Maria touched it carefully, amazed by the detail. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's meant to remind you," James said, "of new beginnings. Leaves fall when seasons change, but they always return, just like hope." Maria felt her eyes warm with emotion. She placed the pendant around her neck, grateful not only for the gift but for the meaning behind it. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. "I wanted to," James replied. "You've given me peace even when I didn't know how to ask for it." They shared a long, warm gaze, full of understanding and quiet appreciation. As the days continued, their bond grew deeper. They talked more openly, laughed more easily, and spent more time outside, walking along the creek, watching sunsets and sharing stories from their past. Maria told him about the little joys of her childhood, the mango trees behind her home, the songs her mother sang in the evenings, the way her siblings used to chase each other through the dusty village paths. James listened with genuine interest, his eyes filled with warmth. In return, James told her stories about the places he had traveled, not in heavy detail, but with gentle humor and gratitude. He spoke of the friendly people he had met, the quiet towns he had passed through, the simple kindness that strangers had shown him. Their conversations were not dramatic. They were full of softness and truth. One afternoon, as they sat by the creek, Maria asked a question that had been quietly growing in her heart. "Do you think your life would have been different if you never met Nalin and her family?" James took a moment to think. The creek bubbled lightly beside them, and a breeze moved through the trees. "Everyone we meet shapes us somehow," he said. "They showed me patience. They trusted me. And even though I left in a moment of confusion, I never stopped remembering them with respect." He paused. "And now, because she came here, I finally understand that I didn't fail them the way I believed I did. That truth changes everything." Maria nodded thoughtfully. She admired the strength it took to carry guilt and the even greater strength it took to let it go. That evening, as they walked back to the cabin, Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, a journey she had once taken out of necessity, but now saw as a blessing. She had left her village to escape hardship, but she had found more than stability. She had found companionship, understanding, and a home that felt peaceful and real. Time passed gently after that, marked by small joys and calm days. The garden began to sprout little green leaves. the cabin filled with the smell of fresh meals and warm sunlight. Even the nights held a sense of comfort, without the weight of unspoken worries. One night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Maria felt a quiet happiness settle into her heart. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes it feels like life brings us exactly where we need to be, even if the path looks unsure." James looked at her with a peaceful smile. "Yes," he said, "and sometimes the people we meet help us understand our own hearts." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to crickets singing in the grass. Maria leaned her head on James's shoulder, and he gently placed an arm around her. They didn't need many words. The night carried enough calm for both of them. A soft breeze brushed past them, warm and gentle, like a blessing from the land around them. The past had found closure. The present felt steady and kind. And the future, though still unwritten, already glowed with promise. Together they had stepped into a new season, one filled with understanding, growth, peace, and a quiet kind of love that didn't need to be spoken loudly, to be felt deeply. Their story had begun in uncertainty, shaped by hardship and hidden truths, but now it continued with hope. And sometimes, Maria thought, that was all anyone truly needed.